Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Julian from Wani, and today I'm sitting here in Toronto's beautiful Opera House with none other than Dan Briggs from the legendary Between the Buried and Me. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm doing great, thanks.
First thing I want to know is, you mentioned before we started, you guys are about 2 weeks into the tour, playing Colors one night, Colors 2 the other night. How's it going so far?
It's going pretty well. It's weird to play two albums that are just a different lifespan apart from each other. 15 years or so, 14, 15 years, and then just an album that we've played hundreds of times almost now. Like we really played Colors a lot on its initial run, and then a few times here or there. And then we did a 10-year anniversary run on it, and then an album that we've now played 5 times. You know what I mean? So that's even longer. It's like a half hour longer. So we're it's like still settling in, but the second album really feels great, and it's still, even though now at this point, that's our pandemic record. We wrote it during 2020, and it's coming up 4 years since we were in that session and writing some of those songs, and to finally play them and in the context, that alone feels great. So in general, yeah, it's feeling really good. It was just, we were talking again before filming that playing them on the same night would be another story, but separating it and kind of jumping into the different mindsets and the different zones. Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to hear it's going well. That said, even though you're not doing them on one night and spreading it out over 2, it's still, you're looking at about 2.5 hours of music between the 2 albums and any other potential songs you may or may not be throwing in. So with that said, what is the preparation process for that like? How do you go about learning or relearning that amount of complex material?
Yeah, that's a good question, because even on a normal tour where we're pulling stuff from, the different eras and stuff and stitching it all together, that stuff will come back, over the course of like a week, dipping in and, generally it's like one day of trying to cram everything into your head, and then spending the rest of the week, playing until you screw up and then going back and fixing. And then it's kind of in there. For this one, I started, about mid-January with I was like, first day one, let me just play Colors. Let me make sure that's in the bank. And 65 minutes later it was. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to think about that for at least a couple weeks now. And then I knew the last song on Colors 2 we hadn't performed yet, Human as Hell, and it's 16-minute blowout. And I was like, I have not thought about the notes, the sequences, the grooves, the anything since we recorded December 2020. So like, I'm gonna start there, And it was a solid, with the songs that we hadn't performed, hadn't played yet, and then getting the ones that we had, but maybe not since 2022, get those back in the brain. It was a solid couple weeks, before I was feeling good, press and play at the beginning and getting through. And then it's just, I kind of just would get in the routine every single day. It was like coffee, and then just like clocking in, clocking in at work, little 20-minute warm-up or so, and then diving in, and then sporadically, as it was getting closer, sprinkling in Colors. And those double-up days were wild, I think some days I would start with Colors, the more familiar one is the warm-up, but then there was ones where I was like, well, I kind of want to feel my best trying to play the newer one. Yeah. So I'd flip it, but then it always feels so good when you're finally in the room with the guys, and we've always been a band that we hold each other accountable. Everyone's just doing their prep, doing their work on their own, getting their sounds together. A lot of this one for me, like the daily routine, is going over keyboard stuff. Okay. Colors 2 is very keyboard heavy for me, as opposed to I don't play almost any keyboards on Colors 1, so stuff like that,
I see we've added a bit of backing track. Very funky. Okay, so I was interesting to learn that you guys make sure that you do most of your prep work and hold each other accountable, so that I guess when you're coming together as a band, that you can probably put it together with minimal band involvement. But that said, how many times did you get together as a band before you actually hit the road?
I think we had 3 dress rehearsals with production, and then first show in Charlotte. our basically home zone.
Yeah.
So that was, both like comforting to be in the home place and also kind of like, oh God, all of our friends and family. And, so but honestly, considering it went pretty well, I would say Colors 2 was like 92% that night. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
So.
Not bad for the first run.
No, it's not good.
That's awesome. I guess this may be looking ahead a little bit more than you guys are thinking about right now being on tour, but now that it's coming up on a few years since the release of Colors 2, and I know you guys are always writing, what have you got in queue there in terms of upcoming projects or upcoming releases?
Outside of the band, I mean, I just finished a record before this tour that's waiting to be mixed. That's an interesting trio. It's harp, bass, and drums, and it's kind of I can't even really fusion doesn't really do it justice or whatever. That's a very fun project with my friend Emily and Chris Allison from Pliny playing drums. Yeah, phenomenal. So that's really fun, and what's been so nice about having this tour cycle as long as it is, I think just being at this point, 20 plus years at the band, is that we're able to kind of like really lengthen our tour cycles for an album. I mean, it used to be like year and a half, shut down for half a year, write a record, record, start the next one. Now this is the fourth year of, the pandemic obviously spaced everything way out, and stuff that we had planned for 2020 was bumped to 2021. The Parallax 2 10-year was bumped to 2023, from 2022. So stuff like that. But what's so nice about that then is having more time at home, more gaps, and less of a feeling of like, oh no, I'm only home for a month and a half. I don't really have time to just like settle and like not be in my office or like casually get my way into the office. I have to like be in there and try to, get to the point where I'm creating and doing stuff before I have to start learning music again. Now it's like, I can have like kind of like a healthy break, get into the office, maybe just tinkering with whatever, and finding my way over the last couple of years to like a couple new, tunes that are definitely between the buried and me. But it's whenever we're in this, pre-shutting down to actually write as a group stage, everyone's kind of doing that. Just picking around, their ideas, and that's how you always have that growth, and then it finally shuts down, then we share our ideas, and we start, really kind of going at it together, and it's I'm excited. I mean, of course, yeah.
That's awesome. So once you get as a band to that shutdown period where you get together and realize you're gonna, start pumping out Between the Buried and Me material, what does that process look like? It sounds like you've written stuff. I assume other members bring stuff to the table, and then how does it come together in a typical fashion?
Well, in a typical non-2020 fashion, right? We'll send some demos back and forth. I always like romanticize the idea of like being in the room together, like maybe on the bus, like on this tour, and popping in the cable and being like, hey man, this is what I've been working on, But that's kind of like, one, it's kind of like not fair to the people you're playing it to, and it's just like awkward for you to like demand that immediate reaction. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, even though I'm really excited about it, you know what I mean? Like someone, like if someone is sending me something new, I want to listen to it, be able to take it in, and then look at the sheet music and really just like wedge myself in, be like, let me get what's on paper, and then what do I hear? What's happening, And even when a song is like an initial idea is sent pretty well composed, I think whoever is sending that, whether it's like me, Paul, Tommy, Blake, had a lot of stuff like that for Colors too. It's like I would think each member is sending it on kind of the basis that like, I just went as far with this idea as I could personally. You know what I mean? Like, and now it's time for the group to get in there. So that's kind of fun, but that's definitely how the process starts. I don't at this point, in my years of writing with various different groups, a bunch, and just offshoots and whatever, just writing with people in general, is I don't want there to be so much of like just me. Like I'm not bored of that, but like I do enough of that. You know what I mean? Enough of like writing on my own in my office, and I'm just like way more excited about what's going to come back or what small idea is going to come in and like set my brain off because it just didn't come from me, you know. So that's always just what's so exciting. And then for this one to get back to being in the room, you know. So Automata was the last time that we were able to do stuff on our own, do some sharing, and then get in the room and really work through, you know, the nuts and the bolts and the bar by bar and work out the demos. And, you know, Paul and I just sitting there with, you know, acoustic guitars chunking out, you know, harmonies or, you know, if we tried this, you know, yada yada, and, you know, stuff like that, which was just lost during the pandemic a bit, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It was totally remote, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome. So speaking of, I guess, taking inspiration from elsewhere, be it your bandmates or other musicians, I always like to know when I speak to, you know, a prolific musician, who are you listening to? I mean, who were you listening to, I guess, last time you wrote an album, and who are you listening to in general now?
Yeah, I mean, 2020, it's funny because for the 2 different nights, y'all said you were here for Colors the other night, I made a very 2007 themed, you know, nothing that was too on the nose. Like, I didn't put, like obviously we were listening to a lot of Opeth and Dream Theater and stuff. None of that, but it was, like, stuff like, you know, some contemporaries that we toured with, our Toronto buds, The End. They were on the playlist. You know, they toured with us Colors era, original Colors tour, Fear Before the March of Flames. And then stuff like, you know, Muse, Mew, like whatever, like stuff of that time that we all, as a band, you know, in the van in those days, were kind of jamming on. Then putting together the 2021, I was immediately like, oh God, like, I don't even want to think about the state I was in 2020. And so it's all like 80s themed stuff. And I think a big part of that was that there was so much comfort listening during that time. I mean, I was listening to a lot of, I mean, I can't really think of much that went into like inspiring the actual music that I wrote, but I think it was just like I was listening to a lot of like Kate Bush and, you know, Peter Gabriel, like I mean, some of my favorite artists, but really like those ones that I will just like, I just go back to and again. And, you know, I'll always kind of get something out of. Lately, I mean, just came out this year, the new Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum is just set my brain, you know, bursting. The new Kim Gordon record from Sonic Youth just came out. I actually just picked it up at Pop Music down the road.
Oh,
great shop. Yeah, that new record of hers is amazing. Yeah, I'm just constantly. It's funny because I feel like I'm not on the pulse of new music, and then there'll just be like a stream of stuff that I'm just like, you know, gobbling up, you know, and an artist like the new Smile record is, you know, beyond, you know, so cool. So yeah.
Awesome. I definitely am going to take some of those recommendations. I haven't checked out most of what you just mentioned there. And on a similar note, I always like to know who are some of your favorite bands that you've had the opportunity to tour with. You know, you guys have had like a 20 plus year career now, and you've toured with a lot of great bands. Who are some of your favorites, either in terms of what they do musically or just who they are as people?
Yeah, well, I mentioned a couple from like the Colors era that we toured with, which was, you know, bands like The End or Fear Before the March of Flames, where it was like we went home and we listened to those records. Like those were, you know, contemporaries, but also like at that time of Colors where we were trying to separate. Somehow we were like, seemed like we were building this little community of bands that seemed like they were also trying to do that and like kind of elevate out, you know, on a more like, you know, and then I started a band with Adam from Fear Before, and he sang on Colors. The band Haken, British band, they're obviously one of our best, you know, best friend bands, and I have a band with 2 of them as well, Nova Collective. But we were just in Europe with them last year, and we tried to get them on this tour, and basically every tour we do in America, we're always like, Haken, just come. You know, I mean, honestly, Acacia Strain, you know, we toured mine and Blake's first full U.S. tour with Between the Buried and Me right before Alaska came out in 2005. Acacia Strain was I think opening. I think they opened that show, or we're like the second of 4 with like the Red Chord or something way back, and it's fun to catch back up with them, you know, after all these years. The last tour we did. Thank You Scientist was a band that was just like, you know, as a group of musicians, you know, to find guys that you could like really, you know, latch onto and delve into, you know, these like musical talks that like went deeper than, you know, just what we were doing on stage that night was really cool and really inspiring. So yeah, it's really fun, and you know, it's fun to like go out with your friends that you already know, but every now and then, you know, you get to go out with these bands that you really connect with, you know, and just yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, I think we both, Brad and I, caught you there on the with Thank You Scientists on that tour. Big fan of those guys. Super fun band. So I guess before we wrap this up, I've heard through the grapevine that you're a big fan of 90s Ontario-based alt rock. You know, I guess it sounds like you were telling me off camera earlier that you lived far enough north that you were getting those radio stations across the border, which is rare. A lot of those bands didn't really have the crossover success.
Yeah.
So who are some of your favorites that you came to realize were not big in the States?
Well, it's wild, you know, you had like obviously like Our Lady Peace really kind of broke in America, you know, with the Clumsy record and stuff. But I'm sure it was still much bigger up here, you know, and I'm Mother Earth and Tragically Hip and the like. But, you know, I think, yeah, where I grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania, we would get, I don't know, I wish I could remember what the station was called in London, Ontario. It might have been like X, you know, FM something. But, you know, you'd hear this stuff, and, you know, I would either tune into that station or, you know, our station at home that was mostly playing, you know, top 40 rock stuff, which at that time happened to be just this brilliant, amazing, really like last wave of incredible, you know, rock music that was universally at that level, and was so fortunate. But also we got like Much Music, you know, so like I would see, you know, they seemed much more music and actual performance based than like MTV was at the time. And MTV even would have special, you know, late night specials that they'd be airing, you know, Nirvana Live and Loud, or like their Unplugged series and all that stuff. But when you're a kid and you're 10 to 13, just taking in MTV Much side by side and these two radio stations side by side, and you just realize it's like one thing, you know, and some of that stuff's really, you know, kind of lived on for me. Like I still listen to probably like, you know, those first core 3 Our Lady Peace records are, you know, yeah, really, really, really interesting stuff, really great, you know, vocal and lyrical stuff. I saw them, you know, one of those early years going to concerts. Maybe I was in 7th grade, and I think they were second on a bill with Eve 6 and Third Eye Blind, you know, classic like 1996, 1997 bill. And, you know, all that stuff like that, you know, you just think of these building blocks, you know, that built onto something else, that got me into this, that got me into that, you know. But coming back around to that stuff, I do think, you know, because, you know, I was listening to some stuff, you know, kind of recently and thinking on, you know, even a band like Tragically Hip that this station out of London played so much. I mean, I know they were big up here, but there was really not a presence of them in America, you know. But listening to those bands and being like, there was something different, you know. It wasn't like as dark, you know, and maybe like gritty as like the stuff that was coming out of America, you know. Yeah. And I'm always curious at that time to try to draw a line, you know, where the stuff could have come from, you know, and I really don't, you know, some of that stuff that was coming out, you know, I really don't know. Even a band like Crash Test Dummies, you know, they're Canadian, you know, I love them. And I was like, I don't know where this comes from, you know, this is incredible stuff, you know. As soon as I got my 12-string guitar, you know, I tuned it up and I was trying to play some Crash Test Dummies, you know. So yeah, indelible stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask if any of it had any, you know, direct noticeable influence on your playing, and it sounds like it just may have.
You never know, you know. Now it's really funny because I can, you know, I've in recent years, you know, gone back and listened to a song like Superman's Dead, and I really, like, of course, not only appreciate, like, it kind of instills the same thing in me that I would have seen on MTV at the time, you know, or heard on the radio, and you know, the way I would have felt then, I can still get a little bit of that with the stuff that I really loved and really had on the loop at that time. But there's like, now I'll zoom out as like an arranger and musician and be like, oh, well, this is like a very interesting song arrangement, you know, where it's like verse, chorus, verse, and then it just goes into another space to end the song. You know what I mean? I'm like, just ending with this bridge that doesn't really tie in with the rest of the song. I'm like, that's okay. That's something interesting was happening here. And when you listen to like the first record, of theirs, it's really more open, and in some areas, which is really interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I love that stuff. I wish I could zoom back to then, at an adult age.
Yeah.
Be able to check some of that stuff out live.
Don't we all? Well, I'll have to let you go. I'm sure you've got a busy day, but thanks again for granting us the time, and very much looking forward to watching you guys play Colors 2 this evening.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All the best.
Yeah, thank you.